talk about the book Bad Dad. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Frank. He lived with his dad and his mom. His dad's name was Gilbert and his mom's name was Rita. His dad was a banger car racer. He used to race the cars in the car track. Every night when Frank would go to bed, his father would go out banger car racing. Every day Frank would ask his dad if he could go with him and sit in the bleachers and watch. But his dad said, "No, mate, I don't want you to see me get hurt." Frank was always sad about that. His father always called him mate. Every night Frank would sneak out as soon as he heard the door close. He would sneak out. There was always a stack of cars which had been destroyed on previous races. He would climb to the top of the cars and watch his dad. His dad had a car named Queenie. He used to ride the car in all of the races. Whenever his dad's car would go around the racetrack, Frank would say, "Go, Dad, go." But his dad would have no idea that mate was right there on top of the stack of cars watching him. And every night, Frank would do the same thing. And his father had no idea about it. If he did, he wouldn't have even went out for banger car racing. But one day it did happen. His dad got very badly hurt on one of his days at banger car racing. While instead of the usual roar the Queenie gave when he started the car, this time a grinding noise came and his car went up ahead without him even controlling it. Everything about banger car racing was when to know how to stop and when to start. But now the brakes won't work. And finally, all the cars crashed into each other just because of Queenie. His dad was taken to the hospital. There, his doctor told that they had to remove one leg of Gilbert's. Frank tried and tried to call his mom, Rita, but she did not answer. Finally, in the morning, Frank's mom came and said, "Oh, Gilbert." And every day, Frank would sleep next to his dad in the hospital. But soon, his mom's visit became less and less. Finally, the doctors came to Dad with a wooden leg. He wore it and then he went clunking all the way back home. But when they went there, on the kitchen counter, they could found a note that said, "Frank, Gilbert, I am so sorry, by Rita." Frank was so sad and so was his father. They both cried and cried till they could cry no more. Soon, Dad lost his job because the judges won't allow him to race banger car racing anymore. They believed it was not safe for him now that he had only one leg. But his dad knew that he could do it. Soon, since Dad lost his job, Frank and his dad were becoming poor. But still they had their furniture and they could sell whatever they want in times of money. But some days there would come a doorbell on the door and Frank would open it. Two guys, one tall and one one very fat would come inside and take anything they thought that was valuable. Frank hated this. Sometimes they wouldn't even open the door, but they would break the bullets and just bust in. It was Frank's birthday. Luckily, those two men did not come. His father bought a big race car set for him. Frank loved it. They would play with the race car set every day, and his father even painted one just like Queenie with a Union Jack on it. And so that they would play with the race car set every day. It was Frank's favorite toy. But one day, the two thieves came back inside and took Frank's race car set. Frank was really sad. But one day, his aunt Flippy came to babysit him. He was so upset because Aunt Flippy would always read her unending weird poems. And so Frank would always hate this. One day, he decided to escape Aunt Flippy when his dad went out. He knew something wrong was going on. His dad never used to leave in the night with him. And so, the two thieves had taken away his bed as well. And so, Frank slept on a deflating lilo that always deflated in the middle of the night. This when usually he had his bed to keep the pillows up and put on his old pairs of pajamas on top and he go out of the house. But now he had not any pillows. So Frank took a piece of straw and covered it with his old pajamas, and then he wanted to escape from Aunt Flippy. She always recited weird poems. Then she went into the bathroom. Luckily, Frank took the opportunity and went outside. There, he went to the place his father said he would go, but there were no places at all where he was there. Finally, he found him in an expensive white lacy car. But where did he get the money to buy it? And inside were the two guys who came and took all the things from his house. And one small guy that was called Mr. Big. Even though Mr. Big was small, he was called Mr. Big. He could not hear anything they were saying, and so Frank climbed on the top of the car, and he did not know that the car would go off. His father was the driver. So he held on tight to the car as it started rumbling and it started moving. As they went on, the three other men who were inside along with his dad said, "Hey Gilbert, we want to know if you can drive just like in the olden days." Gilbert said, well, his dad said that he still can, and so they dared him to do it. And so he did. It went up like a roar. And the three men inside were so scared. They pleaded, "Stop, stop." But his dad didn't want to have it. They had teased him so much. And on Sunday they were surrounded by police. His dad said, "Oh, what should we?" The big man said, "Oh, what should we do?" His dad said, "Don't worry." He came up and went up of all the police cars and onto a towing truck. Then from the towing truck, he flew again and he landed on the road. He quickly drove as fast as he could from the escaping police. Frank looked at all the chaos they had caused. His dad wouldn't have gone that fast if he knew that Frank was hanging on for dear life on top of the car. He wouldn't even have gone that fast if he knew that Frank was there. Finally, they came back to the same spot where the car was parked before. And then the small man called Mr. Big said, "I want to change the number plate next time, or else the police can track us down." Frank knew something was up, and he did not like it one little bit. And so, suddenly, when the brakes were applied, he flew off of the car and landed down somewhere. He quickly hid behind a bin, as Mr. Big said to Fingers and Thumb, the two men. Fingers was the tall one, and Thumb was the fat one. Fingers and Thumbs came all the way and started searching for them. But before that, the Thumb said, "Mr. Big," or as they call him, Governor, "I can't go, my pants are wet." "But you can go." "Who says you not?" "Well, my mom said." "Who cares about your mom now?" said Governor / Mr. Big. And he asked Fingers. Fingers had gone completely dizzy and he couldn't even reply to his master. Then he asked my dad. He got off and said, "I'm going home. My son is waiting for me." But then Governor ordered him, Fingers and Thumb at the same time to go and search. Dad finally found me behind the bin. He stared down at me as if he had gone completely cold. He did not know that his son was on the top of the car the whole time that he drove. When Governor asked Gilbert, "Is there something there?" his father said no, and he gave an expression that told me to go home. I quickly raced off and to the home. If you're living in the 99th floor and the lift is not working, it's really a hard job to climb up the fleet of staircases. Finally, his father reached home. They had to talk. After they finished talking, Auntie Flippy went off in a flash. She had been so tired about babysitting Frank all day. She said that Frank threw tantrums, but Frank wasn't even there. Anyways, Frank had a good night's sleep on his deflating Lilo. The next morning as well, his dad said Aunt Flippy to babysit Frank the next Saturday. It was a long time. On the day of Saturday, when his father was about to leave, Frank said, "Where are you going, Dad?" He said, "None of your business." He told him that Aunt Flip would be here shortly. He pretended that he was asleep and watched as his dad came in front of the bedroom and just looked at Frank if he was sleeping. Frank saw his dad in an outfit he thought he would never see him in again. He was in his banger racing outfit. Frank was so astonished. Finally, Aunt Flip arrived. She dissolved Frank in one of her unending poems again. Finally, Frank fell into bed and said, "I am so tired." There was even a poem about Frank himself, which was not very pleasing to Frank. And he raced out of the house as soon as Aunt Flip fell asleep. He had painted an old shopping cart that was there that he found in the staircases, and then in that he had painted it with the colors of Queenie with the Union Jack. And then he found that was the way he got down the staircases. It was the best. But the problem was when he climbed up the stairs again, he had to carry the trolley all the way back up. But it was so thrilling for Frank to go down the staircases. He almost bumped into a pizza delivery man and Reverend Judith, the church manager, who always invites people to her churches but nobody comes. He bumped into her. She did a somersault, her first one, and fell down. But she was such a nice woman that she was the one who said sorry first. Frank said sorry as he went away down with his trolley. Finally, after reaching down, he came out of the house and saw his dad, but he dared not climb on the top of the car again, as it was so scary for him the last time. He found out what he was up to with those 3 men. He went back to his house again. The next Saturday as well, Aunt Flip babysitted Frank. Well, this time his dad needed money. He did not go away yet. It was not dark yet, so he did not go. Frank and his dad went to the wishing well. It was kind of their sort of bank. When they had money, he used to throw them inside the well like a deposit. And now they were just taking it out like an output. His dad used to attach his wooden leg and throw it down. He used the leg, which was not broken, to hold on to the rim of the well. Then he used to hold the wooden leg out, and Frank would hold on to the wooden leg tightly, and he would be able to reach the well. He would collect up a few coins and then go up. But today, while doing this, the police officer came and said, "What are you doing there? Stealing coins from the well?" "No, no," said Frank. But the shock of the shout made his dad slip and fall into the well. They were in the well soaked knee-length. The police officer said, "What are you doing in there?" Frank said something thinking fast. "Dad's wooden leg fell in here, so we had to take it out." "Oh, really? But how did it fall inside the well?" Frank thought again and said that a dog took it away. A dog took it away and it magically flew from the dog's mouth inside the well. Very unbelievable. He said, No, the dog thought it was a stick and his owner must have always thrown sticks to him and he throws them in the well. But now he took off its dad's wooden leg, thinking it was a stick, and he threw it in the well. Well, okay. Then now that Frank had made it a little more believable, the police officer agreed. Then his father said, "Now, please can you pull us up?" Here, the police officer pulled up Frank, but pulling up his father was a big job. He said, "Now how on earth do we pull up your dad?" While waiting, his father stuffed his pockets with the coins. Then Frank had an idea. "Mr. Police Officer, we can use your pants as a rope to help pull up my dad." The police officer said, "But then everyone will see my underpants." Then Frank said, No. They would think that you are a hero for saving a man who with a broken leg drowning from a well by using your own hands. The man was happy at the thought, and then he pushed down the rope and then his dad caught it. And then he shouted loudly, I am the police officer who has used his own pants to save a one-legged man from drowning in the well in high tone so that he hoped that everyone would hear. But that would only make them laugh. Poor police officer here was helping them by using his own by embarrassing himself. When his dad was pulled up, he and Frank left. His dad showed him the money he had collected from the well. And then Frank said, What is that you are holding on your shirt? His dad opened it and said, There were the police officer's pants. His dad said, I know, it is very naughty. With the money, they decided to call Aunt Flip. They called Aunt Flip and she said she would be right over for the babysitting. Frank went to the sweet shop with the leftover money and bought a few sweets. And he learned about how fingers and thumbs had threatened Raj, the sweet shop owner, to give them a lot of money or else they will take the shop from him. When he reached home, his father still was not there. He said, Where did he go? Then he went back to the sweet shop just in case his father was there waiting for him. But then he heard a roar of an engine. He thought it was Queenie again. So Frank came outside to find not another car except for a pale yellow colored car. Even Raj came out to see if it was Queenie. But it was not. Finally, his dad came back. And Frank and Dad walked back home. There the Reverend Judith came to their house. Frank had opened the door and she was standing there. His dad called her. Who rang the bell? Frank answered, The Reverend Judith. Oh, don't open the door and don't let her inside. Frank said, but the door's already open. Then there was a long, quiet pause. Then his dad said, Did you just hear me what I said now? Yes, said Frank. His dad awkwardly came in the front door and said, Welcome, Judith. The Reverend Judith came and sat down. Care for a cup of tea? Said his dad. Of course, said Reverend Judith. Frank went inside. They used to not have any money to buy milk or a new tea bag. Making tea was a harder job. He took a glass of hot water from the tap and then added some of the one tea bag that was to be used over and over again. But now it was there with only bag and no tea. But since there was no flavor in it, he found some of the old toffee chews on the wall of the kitchen. He took it and put it inside it, hoping that it will dissolve. Then he went to Reverend Judith and gave it to her in a paper cup. Reverend Judith drank one cup of the tea and said, Oh, look at the time. I better get going, even though she had no watch on her hand. She went off. Then his dad laughed. Oh, mate, I knew you could do it. Finally, the Reverend Judith came back once again and said, I will stand in the door for now. I just came to tell you to come to church on Sunday as it is Father's Day. Frank knew how much the kind the Reverend Judith was, and so he said, Dad, we should go. It is Father's Day after all. And so they did. So they made a deal. They would go on Sunday to the church. It was finally Saturday and it was time for Frank's Aunt Flip to come over to babysit him. And his father went to be. This time Frank was sure he needed to come. He managed to climb into the boot of the pale yellow car, where the three men, Thumbs, Fingers, Mr. Big and his dad were sitting in the car. Somehow the boot opened and Frank got out of it. He was so scared. He found a nearby shopping trolley. He got on it and whizzed on front to the driver's window, hoping to be covered. But his dad saw him and said, "Mate, what are you doing here?" There was no time. They were in the middle of a big road, and so his father told Mate to get inside the car. Mate was sticking half in and half out of the car. Finally, he managed to get inside the car. They drove off. His dad was very confused of what Frank was doing here. And so, finally, they reached the bank. Luckily, Mr. Big was not inside the car. They reached the bank. Frank wondered what they were doing at the bank. Fingers and Thumbs got out of the car and went to the bank. They blew it up and took hundreds of pounds of money and came and sat in the car. His father began to drive really fast out of there. They were chased by police. Frank understood what Fingers and Thumbs had just done. They had robbed a bank. Frank said to himself, "What is this Mr. Big doing?" But then his dad made a turn to a football court. Fingers and Thumbs said, "This is not the way to Governor's mansion." "I thought we'd take a little shortcut," said his dad. They ran through the football court, but the police caught up with them. Then his dad said, "Who wants to play football?" He knocked over the 3 police cars that had come inside the goals and they rode off. But soon, the police helicopter came and caught up with them. And then there were more police cars on top. His dad said, "Oh, we are never gonna get past this now." Frank said, "You can jump over the cars. I know you can do that." But his dad said, "When I did that stunt, there was weight packed up the back of the car especially for it." "But you already have weight back here," he said, nodding to Thumbs. He said, "No, it would take all of 3 of us grown-ups at the back seat to make that amount of weight. But then who will drive?" "Me," said Frank. They had no choice, so Frank drove them all the way out. But then Frank said, "I can't reach the pedals." His dad gave Frank his wooden leg. Finally, they reached out. His dad said, "Frank, come on, stop the car. We can rest for some time." But then Frank said, "Dad, what? Your wooden leg is stuck to the pedals." And indeed it was. Finally, his dad, after so much effort, got it out. But they had crashed into a tree and they were now upside down. Soon, there were cows and pigs in this farm. They had to walk the rest of the way by foot. Finally, they reached Governor's mansion. They came to Governor and said, and then he gave fingers and thumbs their share of the money. Frank said, Mr. Big, yes, what about my dad's share? He said. Mr. Big was astounded. He said, you little boy, dare to speak to Mr. Big himself? He said. Mr. Big persuaded Jack to join him and his mother there. Frank was surprised. My mom is here? His dad finally explained to him. Governor called Rita, Frank's mom's, and brought her here. She was completely different and Frank could hardly recognize her. They had gone off back home in a flash. Auntie Flip was right there. She said, well, where are you guys gone? We just went to buy a pail of milk, said his dad. Then give me the milk. I could make some proper tea for once, said Auntie Flip. But there was no milk to be given. So Frank said, we gave it back. Why? Said Auntie Flip. Because it was expired. And we came back. Finally, Frank and his dad went to sleep the night and Auntie Flip went back to her house. And then on Sunday, they went to the church as promised. And then they were called. His father was arrested and accused of the bank stealing. And then so he was put into the jail. Frank was so upset. It had been about 1 month, or no, 2 months since his father had gone to jail. He lived with his Auntie Flip. He soon started to like her poetry and quiches that she made. She even made pigeon quiches which were smoothie like drinks. Then he went. Soon Reverend Judith came inside the house and then Auntie Flip and Reverend Judith were talking. Then Frank told them all about his dad and what had happened. He told them to help him free him. But Reverend Judith and Auntie Flip said no, we cannot do that. Frank was so angry that he marched up to his bed. All scared. He could hear Auntie Flip and Reverend Judith talking in low voices below. He found a glass. He put the glass to the floor and now he could listen to what they were saying. They were speaking. If we could just return the amount of money which was stolen, maybe they would free Frank's dad. That was just the idea Frank had to do, but he made the list. First, break into Mr. Big's mansion and steal the amount of money he had stolen from the bank. Next, return the money to the bank and come back. But he needed an adult to this, and neither the Reverend Judith or Auntie Flip was ready to do it. He went to Raj's sweet shop to ask Raj for advice. Even though he had not any money with him, Raj let him have some sweets for free. Then Raj said, your Auntie Flip came in this morning. I never seen her before, but I realized she was your relative. How? Asked Frank. She looks like your father. She resembles your father. For me, he looked like twins. That hit Frank. He had the perfect idea. He went back and he said, Auntie Flip to go in his dad's place for just one night. and then his dad could help him get the amount of money and put it in the bank. Then they could swap places later. Finally, he persuaded his aunt to do it. It was this morning when the visitors were allowed to go and see the people in prison. His Auntie Flip wore her long flowery gown, hoping that his dad would fit into it, and she held a tin of pigeon pie. The idea was that Frank would accidentally spill it and it would break into 100 pieces. And then when Auntie Flip and his dad go under the table to pick up the pieces, they won't actually pick up the pieces. They'll change clothes. This happened absolutely correctly. Then finally, his dad was free. He and his dad walked out. First, they went to the block of flats First, they went to Auntie Flip's house and changed. Then Dad drove Queenie. He needed to find Queenie in the junkyard where they had wreckage last night. But the crane was smashing the cars into pieces. When they got into Queenie and they were about to go, they found out who was actually the crane driver. It was Fingers. They had met Thumbs at the court. All his 6 brothers were locked up in there. Finally, all of them, Thumbs must have reported to Fingers about what he had saw. Finally, they went back and he almost told them. Frank went inside Mr. Big's house and almost stole the amount of money, but Mr. Big was there. Finally, he stole the amount of money and Mr. Big was knocked out by his dad's wooden leg that his dad had thrown. They were about to go outside. They saw Frank's mom. Frank told his dad that they had to come back for her. She was so sorry. Then she told them to go before his dad woke up. Mr. Big woke up. But along the way, Mr. Big's 2 black cats caught them on their heads and they couldn't go. Finally, Rita, Frank's mom, came and freed them from the cats. And they ran off before Mr. Big could come. They went to the bank, but just as they were there, Mr. Big, Fingers and Thumbs were there. They had blown up the bank just in case they thought that he and Frank and his dad were inside the bank having his precious money. But finally, Frank and his dad were hiding behind a bin. When Mr. Big, Thumbs and Fingers were inside, Frank and his dad went inside. They were about to put the money inside when Mr. Big, Fingers and Thumbs came along. Then when they had opened the safe, Mr. Big said, well, who do we have here? He tried to persuade Frank to join him and his mom at his big mansion. But finally, Frank pretended that he saw all the money and joined Mr. Big's side. He went inside the safe with them, but when they were all happily enjoying the sight of the money inside, Frank backed away. He locked the door, but sadly it couldn't lock as they had blown away the lock. They used his dad's wooden leg to jam them inside. Not only had they restored the money, but the criminals were also caught. They drove Queenie all the way back to Aunt Flippy's house. And then they went to Aunt Flippy's house and they changed their places and came back. This time the criminals were caught. They all went to the court to find out if Frank's dad could be released. Frank spoke up and his dad was called to the court. He said that he wasn't involved in the second crime one bit and that and but that and the church priest said that he was so sorry for seeing him a bad dad, and now he was a good dad at all costs. Then, when he was about to go free, the police officer came along and showed the wooden leg to everyone. Frank and his dad explained everything to the person in the court, and soon he and his dad were the best everyone yet, and they were in the church next Sunday for Reverend Judith and Aunt Flip's marriage. They will always be nice and they will stay together.